Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the third lecture where we're going to be finishing off chapter 4 for IMY 310. Unfortunately, I thought we were only going to just be able just have to do the first two lectures of the chapter via this strange form of YouTube lecturing, but since we're not having class for the rest of the week, I figured I may as well keep it going and finish off the chapter for you. Now, in the first two lectures, which you can find on the channel, which you also would have watched on ClickUP as well, dealt with using technology for communication and using it for collaborative activities within a shared workspace to make that shared workspace more efficient, as well as communicating over a long distance in the case of communication. Now, this last part of the chapter deals with what we call awareness, which we'll get to now. So, what exactly is awareness? Well, awareness is basically just knowing what's around, who's talking to whom, what's going on at any given point in time in any situation. Now, peripheral awareness is a similar sort of thing. It's just about keeping your eye on your surroundings, that sort of understanding that somebody's talking to somebody else in the periphery, and understanding exactly what's going on in the context of your environment. So that's peripheral awareness, and in general, awareness is a very simple concept. Because it's something we're all very used to in general, essentially just meaning that you're aware without having to pay attention as to what is going on around you. So for instance, overhearing and receiving all deal with awareness. That's a low-tech awareness mechanism. It's a little spin board noting whether or not a lecturer or professor is in or out of the office, in the lab, so on and so forth. Now, this is pretty low-tech, and I'm pretty sure nobody really uses it anymore. Instead, you have applications like using a Pi that's hooked into some stuff, maybe a Pi hooked into some little LED screen, which transmits specific messages that have been read from Twitter, things like that. So nobody really uses something like that anymore. Instead, we have higher-tech things, and obviously, it's an awareness mechanism, something that supports awareness, because it lets students know where their lecturer is in or out of the office, for instance. So designing technologies to support this awareness, or support awareness as a concept, is obviously fairly important, otherwise it wouldn't be in the textbook and we wouldn't be talking about it. Now, specifically, workspace awareness is quite important because, again, this sort of awareness leads to better communication within an institution, as well as better collaboration within a shared workspace. And that's why we have various technologies like the React table, the Reflect table, and the Dynamo to enhance that collaborative user experience. Workspace awareness there, nice definition. The up-to-the-moment understanding of another person's interaction within the shared workspace. Again, linking back to the fact that awareness normally deals both with communication and collaboration. So that's the React table. It's a tangible interface whereby various participants put various different tangible blocks and objects onto this table. The table links up the tangible blocks and objects, and then different kinds of music and sounds can be made by the positioning of the objects on the table and their relation to one another. Now, obviously, from an awareness perspective, it supports awareness because you need to be aware of where exactly the object is on the table to create specific sounds, and it allows for better collaboration in that regard, because the shared user experience, or in this case both users, but in any other case, all users will know exactly where everything is on the table at any given point in time, and thus why it might be making the music that it is. So it's a very interesting little thing to support awareness there. The Reflect table is one of my personal favorite examples. It's just a table with a bunch of LEDs in it, and a bunch of people sit around the table, and the table has microphones in it. And the more you talk within a conversation, the more LEDs light up on the table. So you can see there, the girl on the right seems to be taking over the conversation quite a bit. And by contrast, the guy opposite her doesn't really seem to be talking that much. Now, why is that? There is, of course, the potential that this person might be a bit shy, but because he is directly opposite the person who's talking the most, there is a possibility that he potentially feels intimidated by this person, and that's why perhaps he's not talking as much as he should. You can see there the person next to the guy talking to Lisa is also talking a fair amount, but more or less about the same as the person opposite him as well. So I wonder what our classes would look like if we all sat around the reflect table. Probably be me with a bunch of LEDs lit up, and all of you not really saying much, especially in this special series of YouTube lectures, because I don't have feedback, which is very strange. And then we have the dynamo system. Now the dynamo system was a system put in place in common rooms to facilitate, firstly as like a talking point. So the fact that the system was in the common room was something that people could talk about. But the dynamo system actually just facilitated things like file sharing. So being able to see all of the different files on a shared network, very similar or a more visual representation of something like DC++, which I know a lot of the reses use. I know Tux Village uses it, or they did use it. And it's just interesting to visualize all of these files so that it supports better awareness of understanding what exactly is on the network at any given point in time. Now, notification systems also deal with awareness, but they deal with it in a lot more of a subtle way than what these previous systems we've discussed are used to. Obviously, notification systems only notify users once something has happened, once some sort of state has changed, instead of obviously consistently monitoring something to see very specific changes in state. It provides information about shared objects as well as the progress of collaborative tasks. Facebook is obviously very useful for or uses this a lot because they use notifications all the time. And then Drive is a very interesting collaborative system that utilizes good notification systems to support awareness. If you look at, for instance, a Google normal Word document in Google, I can't remember, I think it's just a Google Doc actually. So if you look at a Google Doc, for instance, you can always see where everybody's cursors are within the document. So that supports the awareness for collaborative task completion, because you know where people's cursors are. Obviously it also increases trolling because you know Ivan's cursor is there, so you're going to put your cursor next to Ivan's cursor and delete everything that he's typing. Don't do that, it's mean. Anyway, then we also have Babel, which is another piece of collaborative or another piece of software that was designed for awareness. Now, Babel exists in this little circle, and in this circle there are various little dots, and each of these dots represents a handle of a user in a chat room. Now, the more this chat room is being taken up by one specific user, the closer to the middle of the circle they move, and that kind of hopes to try and modulate conversation, because if you're not talking that much, you'll be outside the circle. Maybe you want to get in the circle, whatever the case there is. So Coco is another thing to support awareness, specifically in institutions, and it's actually a very interesting little prototype. It's basically just a floor plan of an office, or a virtual floor plan of an office, showing where each of the employees are at any given point in time. Now, if we remember portholes from the last lecture, Coco seems to be a lot less invasive or strange. It essentially just shows everybody where people are, perhaps how long the meeting will take, stuff like that. So very important and very good for supporting awareness, so you know where everybody in the institution is at more or less any given point in time. So what's next for awareness? Now, if we think about awareness within the broader social context, we can see that it's definitely something that's important as we move into a social generation. We have things like Facebook and Twitter, and everybody's always updating us on any given thing in their life at any point in time during the day. So generally we tend to have quite a good sense of awareness of what our friends or acquaintances or colleagues might be doing at any given point in time, because they share and broadcast information on Facebook and stuff like that. So what comes after something like these short social media-esque status updates? Well, we have things like live blogging, which is basically walking around with a GoPro or a video camera and recording everything. I particularly like the idea. The thing that puts me off live blogging is if I live vlogged my entire day, aside from the days spent at home, of course, you have to then scrub through something like more or less 6 to 8 hours of content a day to get highlights to put up on YouTube, and who's really going to be watching those things anyway. It is, of course, however, pretty handy if you're live vlogging for the reason because for memory purposes, either to help remember your day, or if you have a serious disease that deteriorates memory, like something like Alzheimer's. And then with regards to micro-chatting, what happens beyond tweeting and Snapchatting? What happens beyond these short bursts of information? Nobody really knows. A couple of interesting applications have been coming about recently. Stuff like Haibu, for instance, which allows you to see the person you're chatting to's message as they type it. So I'm not sure if that will necessarily become a thing that surpasses or supplants something like tweeting or Snapchatting, but it's interesting to think that perhaps this is the new way of social interaction, where you get to see everybody's weird and strange blunders as they happen. So, if we look at a summary of the chapter, we first looked at things like social mechanisms, just to define how social interaction takes place. So we looked at things like turn-taking, various conventions of face-to-face communication, and stuff like that, as well as different ways to communicate and how to coordinate our activities, so on and so forth. And then we looked at awareness, being able to be aware of what other people are doing, what technologies help facilitate letting other people know what they're doing so that their awareness is also heightened, so on and so forth. And then we looked at many examples of technologies that support these 3 pillars that I spoke about in the first lecture of communication, collaboration, and awareness. If you want to, I know it's a YouTube lecture, so we might not necessarily get to this, and it's even a suggestion when we give this in class anyway. But if you'd like, do an exercise. Change your writing style of how you normally type text-based messaging. So if you are like me and you're a grammar nerd and you type everything out, start to type in more abbreviations. See how long it takes the people you're talking to recognize the change, to be annoyed by the change, so on and so forth. And then see whether you can increase the efficiency of your mobile text communication by resisting this urge to be more grammatically correct. Now, if you are all in first year or maybe high school, I know you'd all be all up in the train to not grammatize everything, to not use correct grammar and use lol speak and stuff like that. But I'm hoping by the fact that you're all in third years now, common sense is taking hold and you actually type properly. So try to resist the urge to type properly. Use more lol speak. Go back about 10 years in your development and report the results to me. It'll be very interesting to see if any of you do it. How quickly it takes your peers to notice if they get annoyed, so on and so forth. Anyway, this hopefully concludes the last of the YouTube video lectures that I'll have to be giving this semester. In terms of general admin stuff, most of it's on ClickUp. I mentioned perhaps extending the deadline for your paper prototypes, and I said that'll probably move a week on, but we won't move any other things. The semester test will probably stay the same date, but we might cover less content. And of course, there is no class on Monday. Yay for not having to get up at 9:30. And I think IMY 300 might be cancelled as well, but I'm not entirely sure. So anyway, thank you for watching this if you did watch it. If you didn't, I'm very sad because I've just spent lots of time editing and uploading this thing to YouTube. But anyway, thank you very much. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And I'll see you all in class.